Well, the date is October the 23rd of 2025. And I actually meant to start this a while ago, but look, I get after you. Lots of different excuses, but probably the best reason is just laziness and maybe disorganization as a subset of that. But I'll get on with it and right into it anyway, straight away. What I suppose I want to do is, we're a month away, pretty much. This is why I wanted to give myself more time. We're pretty much a month away, again, from yet another anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And maybe in many ways, it's very old news. 22nd of November, 1963. So how many years will it be? Is it going to be 62 years? I think. I might be off in my mouth. It's a little bit of extra pressure to try and do the mental arithmetic while being live. But anyway. By the way, I'm broadcasting. Airs and graces on me. But anyway, I'm streaming live onto YouTube. And just checking actually that I'm live. Yeah, okay, I am. Sorry for the pause there. Streaming live onto YouTube and streaming live onto Odyssey. I set up this stream through OBS, and so there wasn't any sort of advanced notification that went out to anybody, but hopefully one or two people might find the stream in due course. I'll try not to ramble though and waste any introductory time here. What I want to try to achieve maybe is to, if I'm lucky, get to the end of this book by November 22nd. If not, maybe I'll skip ahead to what I maybe perceive to be the final judgment, I suppose, of this book. I think it'll become pretty apparent fairly early on anyway. But nonetheless, I'll try not to say too many hot button words nor give away the ending or the final conclusion, the judgment, too early on. I try to allow the story to unfold. The other thing then again is I think that at this stage probably everybody has come to this realization anyway, because the answer does seem to be the same as it is for every other conspiracy theory, so-called, like that whatever is not the sort of official narrative is therefore a conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theory, as we now know, has been made to imply crackpot theory or contradictory nonsense theory, even though the so-called official theory never makes sense on its face anyway, and itself is always self-contradictory and a whole load of nonsense. But this is, I suppose, the nature of not just psychological operations, but the humiliation ritual, I suppose, has been to tell people, do not believe the evidence of your own eyes and ears, or disregard that healthy skepticism that your own mind is telling you to have, or the gut feeling that even if you don't know enough about what is being presented to you, that you know something is not right, something is off about what they're telling you, what the supposed good guys or people in the mainstream media are telling you. The people who we're supposed to trust to be fair and balanced, or the reporters of record, when our gut or our healthy minds tell us, this can't be right, this doesn't sound right, I don't know much, but I know this doesn't sound right, kind of thing. We're told, no, disregard those healthy immune system warning signs in your mind, and just listen to us and believe what we tell you, even though it's impossible to believe because it's self-contradictory and nonsense on its face, you know. So I think that's part of the humiliation ritual on us all, where they tell us, break your own mind, break your mind, or contort it into a sort of bizarre shape to try and fit into the box that we're presenting to you, you know. You must believe, even though it's nonsense. And I think then people who do suppress their own mind or contort their own mind in that way that's them humiliating themselves. It's desecrating their own temple, you could say, if the mind is between the two temples. That is them desecrating their own temple in order to believe obvious lies and nonsense. So I'll say hello there to Carl, Jack and Lily. It's great to have you join me, because I wasn't sure, I didn't know how to put out a notification in advance when I set this up through OBS, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need another whys and wherefores. You might notice that on screen there, if you can see it, I have your comments appearing. It's probably not so readable, but I intend to do maybe one of these every day if I can, right? But I won't waste the time nonetheless. I might actually just read through this whole book, but I certainly want to skip forward to the good bits. Or skip around. It's all good though. I will use this time though to introduce the author. You probably have heard of him. It's Michael Collins Piper, and he was, I think, at the time it might not have been so obvious, but now I think in retrospect, I think even though he's lesser known for sure, we could see that he was the real deal. He was what, say, Alex Jones wished he could be. And in fact, Alex Jones tried to sabotage him, even though he smiled at him or called him up even on his own radio show. He called Michael Collins up on Michael Collins' radio show and said what a fan he was. Meanwhile, he tried to get him cancelled, or at least his syndication cancelled with all other radio stations. But I was looking him up there just before coming online here to stream, and doesn't say anything really about any details about the radio show that Michael Collins Piper did, but he did it out of Washington, D.C. anyway. And he was a political pundit, you could say, but a genuine one. And just in Wikipedia, there doesn't give any details as to even how long or between what years. But he wrote this book anyway, Final Judgment, and I think you probably do know that, it's not none of your first rodeos either, and I don't mean to be preaching to the choir, and I know we know, but look, I think it's interesting to get to some details, even though we can always guess who, like in general terms, is behind it, It's always the you-know-whos. And I'm going to be a little bit, I suppose, more brave in a way by putting finer points on these things. But we're going to put certain names on certain things as to who might have been behind things. And that's certainly, I think it seems to be more permissible, more allowed, and more, I suppose, difficult for them to sort of cancel it, because you're stating facts and you're stating names. You're not saying anything about a certain group. You're actually saying this guy here, that guy there. And then, we can notice that there's certain ties that bind all these people, or a certain thread that runs through all these people, or a certain commonality. We know, I know, you know, and I know, but it always seems obvious in retrospect. And I often feel myself, because I am a sort of very maybe not defeatist exactly, but I am not optimistic. So what's that word? I would say that I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist, but I often wonder, what is the point in just chit chat and talking about this sort of stuff? I couldn't find, by the way, an audiobook. Michael Collins Piper would have been the perfect guy to have read his book into an audiobook, but if it exists, I couldn't find it. Maybe I didn't look in the right places, but even if there was an audiobook of Michael Collins Piper reading this book, I think there is something to be said for going live specifically and talking about it. It keeps things current. And I think for all of us, even though we know who it is, there is a tendency for all of us to become, if not despondent, like I often feel, I'll admit it, complacent at least, or even just to feel that we'll wait it out, because we still need to wait for things to reach a sort of critical momentum. But we all have to play our part, I believe. As much as I hate it, and it feels so frustrating that, I'm just one drop of water, blah, 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 in this great ocean, but we have to contribute our part to something about changing the zeitgeist. I certainly don't want to engage in frivolous conversation, but I think it is important. And it's sort of an obligation that we all have to still speak out, even though it might feel like that our meager or minuscule contributions do nothing. I'll just there's a few more comments there, so I'll just take a little moment to just acknowledge you guys and read it out here. I'll just scroll back a little bit. The well has been poisoned, says Carl. Yeah, every single time, says Jack. Yes, indeed, it's the perfect phrase, isn't it? Listening at work, Lily, and it's great. Lily always makes me feel so guilty because she's such a grafter, not a grifter, a grafter. Always at work and multitasking, and I can barely do one thing at a time. You know? Alan Hargreaves, the voice of reason. I was like, is it a sobriquet? Is that what it's called? An undername? He says, hey all. And Jack, cheers. Yeah, cheers to you. So hopefully, even though I know, Jack, that you'll find it not just useful in some way, but actually there'll be a few little finer points of interest in this. Ball Busters there. Yeah, good to see you on YouTube, and I've listened into some of your recent ones. I actually did catch, I know you weren't very pleased or happy with it, and we won't get into the reasons why, but I did catch your live stream there with Stu Peters, though I don't know if you took it down or I just can't find it anymore, but however. You just went above the 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and you're recently in this year allowed back on YouTube, I suppose. Something along those lines. So it's important, I think, to stream on YouTube. And that's why I'm trying to be braver on YouTube here. By the way, if the stream goes down, I am simulcasting onto Odyssey, and I put the link for that in the description here. So if it does go down at any stage, we'll see. You might rejoin me over there. But I'm being brave, and I'll say whatever is on the screen here, I suppose, and a lot more channels, the big channels, of course, we know why, that they've got back channel deals. And there's a lot of controlled opposition, of course, as well. Not all, but, a lot of them. But there does seem to be a sort of too much of that they know we know. And so I'm kind of thinking that you're kind of allowed, say, just the names of certain things. As long as it's not too vitriolic while you're saying it, So, anyway, Ball Busters says, oh, look, it's the Irish Jig. This is a good book, but it's still a lot of speculation. Yeah, maybe so, but worth reading out. And look, the thing is, even if speculation, I would just say, if some of it is unproven, we're never going to get cast iron proof here with any of this. And you know it by, it's got the same old ring to the whole thing, and you just know. And by the way, there's probably no one single reason. I would say that they all did it. They all colluded. Every person you could ever think of was colluding and collaborating and conspiring together, and more, to do multiple things, because their aims are always manifold, But yeah, I mean, to be fair and scrupulously fair, even if the other side wouldn't be, yeah, sure. But it would be not just speculation, but educated surmisations more than a guess, Anyway, it says the most latest edition is less scattered. The Lansky element is of a high import or importance. Well, yes, and I take without, of course, giving the end away, or the final conclusion away, final judgment. Meyer Lansky is, the big name named in here, but in equally, I suppose, David Ben-Gurion and anybody else who might have been a member of whatever, what would you call them? From their perspective, freedom fighting or sort of terrorist paramilitary organizations like the Irgun and others who really, I mean, I'm sure you're well aware of, but I've only just been recently getting to know the names of them. I did a video there yesterday, but it kind of messed up, and I'm going to have to recover it and publish it later. Anyway, it's all by the by. I suppose it's not a bad thing anyway to say now, since this has come up, that the people behind this, according to this book at the very least, are not the mafia. If we say it's the mafia or the CIA, but all of those together, is this element, the Meyer Lanskys and the Bugsy Siegels. And when I was a kid or younger or watching mafia movies, it never occurred to me that any of them whether they were the bagmen or the bean counters or the businessmen or any of these people, whether they were the tough guys or not on the streets, I just thought they were all Italian. I never, I'd heard of Meyer Lansky, and I think I'd heard of Bugsy Siegel, but that was probably about it. It never occurred to me, that those names rang like a tuning fork like they do now. You kind of go, that little ding goes off where you kind of go, that name, I wonder if, in these days, we know you don't have to go to Wikipedia and you don't have to go to early life anymore to kind of go, his parents came from the Ukraine, or his parents came from Latvia or Lithuania, or came from Belarus, or came from Russia, or, fled during the pogroms and, came from some place in Germany or whatever, But that's always the way, or Poland or whatever, And so I was a rube. I was a naive little boy for such a long time. And because I was lazy and because I thought I knew everything there was to know, I really didn't bother reading anything for it. I read a bit when I was a kid, but I didn't bother reading anything. I just, I wasted my time, and I thought I knew all there was to know. But that's, I suppose, what catches out a lot of people. They think they know things, and they don't want to be taught things. They don't have to humble themselves and admit that they didn't know things. So, what with this book now, I can't say that I've read it properly. I have just, over the last couple of weeks, skimmed through it, very much skimmed through it. And so I know how it's going to go. But that's about it. I kind of like the idea of reading it for the first time, and my reactions as I'm reading it with you being more legitimate because they're not rehearsed, if you see what I mean. But I'm not sure if there'll be time between now and 22nd November, but we'll see where we get anyway. Last thing that I wanted to do was to look at just the Wikipedia of Michael Collins Piper. As I say, I think Alex Jones was jealous of him, or saw him as a legitimate person and a legitimate threat, and for probably many reasons, somebody who he didn't want to be in competition with him, and as I say, tried to scupper him or sabotage him. Meanwhile, playing the snake and calling into his radio show, and I remember, like, it's online, it's available, maybe even on YouTube, but certainly would be on Odyssey or elsewhere, of him ringing in and telling him what a great fan he was, like basically sucking up to him. But then, as Michael Collins Piper said himself, he discovered later he was trying to strong arm or bully or threaten all the smaller radio stations who were syndicating Michael Collins Piper's show, trying to threaten them to say, like, that he wouldn't. It's along the lines of he wouldn't allow them to syndicate his show if they also did his show, this kind of thing. So that's an insight into, and I know none of you would probably still rate Alex Jones at all, even if you might say, oh, well, yeah, but we know everything about him, but he's a net positive, or he has done some good things or whatever. It does show, what kind of character he was. But I'll come back now and check the comments in a second, but just to say that Michael Collins Piper was born only in 1960, but he died in 2015, only aged 54. Now, they say that he died of a heart complication, some kind of myocardial infarction. I'll skip on to what it says here. Probable, according to the coroner, probable myocardial infarction, or ischemic cardiomyopathy and coronary artery disease, and listed diabetes as another significant condition. But it makes me think of, was it the Church report, and again the audio, and I'm sure you're all well familiar with it, is available, of sometime was it in the late 70s or early 80s, when they were making it known publicly that the CIA had a gun that could shoot these ice pellets that could make it seem as if somebody had a heart attack but hadn't really. So, I'm in my 50s now, and yeah, I can't believe that I suddenly wasted my life, and I'm suddenly old. I'm certainly on the downhill track, but it's still young as well, relatively speaking. Young enough to warrant a coroner's report or some kind of inquest or coronary what's it called? I forget the other word, where post-mortem or something like that. But the other thing that I want to say is that he was connected, I think, if not directly to certain people, certainly, less than 6 degrees of separation, to a huge network, I think, of people who were, in retrospect, luminaries of what they always call people like the far right, and you know the way it is, neo, I won't say this word just yet, but you know the way it is, right? And what else did they say? White supremacist and all this sort of stuff, So I just want to mention a few names here. And one of them, because I was reading with Frank De Silva and some others, who himself was connected to all these guys on X recently, and over the last year, I suppose, and more, some other books. One of them, Which Way, Western Man, which was fascinating insight and heartbreaking as well to read all these things confirmed. But Willis Carto, anyway, he helped get published a book or republished in the 60s by Francis Parker Yockey, Imperium. And he was a guy who was at the Nuremberg trials and basically walked out and said, I won't be a party to this. I think he was a security guard or something like that, or security officer, and said, I want no part of this. This is a sham sort of a thing. And so basically put a target on his back, and the CIA and FBI were always after him and hunted him down. And he sort of fled America and went to Ireland to write his book called Imperium. So Willis Carto was connected to Michael Collins Piper as well. He said Piper was a regular contributor to both the Spotlight, it says in Wikipedia here, and its successor, the American Free Press, newspapers backed by Willis Carto. And it says here, I'll just read it out directly as it says on Wikipedia. I'm just quoting. Noted for their anti-Semitic and white separatist / white nationalist themes, which, obviously is intended to denote or connote terrible, evil, nasty people then if they're associated with this sort of thing. Piper was described on his website as political progressive in the La Follette Wheeler tradition. These were American politicians from the 1920s to 40s, or actually early 19th century. I wasn't aware of them, but maybe you guys are. He wrote such books as The High Priest of War, in which he criticised the neoconservatives in the Bush administration. Of course, we know what the neoconservatives are, at the very minimum, mildly speaking, controlled opposition, or controlled right. And Final Judgment, where he claimed that, and, it's not giving it away to say, he claimed that Israel's Mossad, the CIA, and organised crime, I suppose it's like 3 ways of saying the same thing, was responsible for the assassination of US President John F. Kennedy. He had been criticised by many organisations, including the Anti-Defamation League. Of course, isn't it great? I mean, as they say, it isn't true, or you haven't made it. It isn't true until you know who denies it, and you haven't made it until the ADL features you on their website. The Simon Wiesenthal Centre, of course, the Centre for Playing the Smallest Violin in the World, about history, and the Middle East Media Research Institute, that's MEMRI, MEMRI, maybe it's a pun on the word memory, which have described Piper as a promoter of I can hear Mark Dice's dun-dun-dun-dun, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and dun-dun-dun-dun, Holocaust denial. Merciful hour. These sound like terrible people, and we're obviously then only reading the book to find out how terrible it is, but you know the way it is, right? A lot of this is going very mainstream, so it almost seems quaint to read this now at this stage. But I think the time is right, as I say, where these things do need to be spoken. And, boundaries to be brushed up against, if not tested on platforms. You know the way it is. I'll check back now in a second to see if I'm still live. I think this is important as well. In Piper Collins's early life, he says, Michael Collins Piper, or Wikipedia rather says, Michael Collins Piper claimed his political engagement was inspired by his older brother's experience in the Vietnam War, which to me is heartbreaking and poignant. And I think it says a lot about the background to all of this, the motivation to all of this, And the likelihood then, it adds more to the estimation of what Michael Collins' Piper's character was like, because you get an insight into his motivations. What drove him, you know? He once said his late brother never completely recovered from the physical and psychological impact of the war. Exactly. So I'll pause it there. I might come back to his radio show, actually, which there is a little topic on it here. I'll come back to it in a second. I'll just check in with the chat here. And I very much appreciate having some people join me. What I will say is I'm reading the chat from YouTube. I don't know how to feed or pipe the chat from Odyssey into OBS yet. Maybe I'll figure it out before the next one. So sorry if you're commenting live on Odyssey. I'll see if I can check that a little bit later. Lily says, I have them fatigue. Yeah. Oh, well, and I'll go back a bit more here. I see that I might have skipped some more here. Jack says, I know that John, meaning me, believes that JFK died that day, but I don't. Nobody died that day. I'm open to that, Jack. And I think going back to, do you know when I used to talk to JC there on the live streams, we did at least one episode talking about JFK, and if I'm not misremembering, he either believed or certainly considered as a possibility that the whole thing was a psyop, in that regard, that it was just a stage show. And I know, like, it's not an unknown theory. A lot of people do think that, but I'm open to it. And by the way, as far as, you know, the central theme of this book, it's that, you know, Israel or David Ben-Gurion or whatever actors in the Israeli state collaborated with the American, we'll call them for now, Zionist people in the organized crime. If that's the case, the tenet of this book, or the central thesis, is that JFK was killed because these guys, these Israelis, let's call them, learned that JFK was intent on stopping them acquiring a nuclear weapon. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's very obvious now, looking back over the last 50 or 60 years or whatever, that the weapon of the Cold War was fear of a thing. So the thing didn't need to exist for that weapon to be utilized for decades. And it was, and it still is. The fear over our minds, where everybody just said, keep your head down, capitulate, crawl under a desk, hide under a bed, and just let daddy government do whatever he wants to do. And daddy knows best, kind of thing, you know. And daddy might get angry sometimes, but you just got to stay out of his way and let daddy do what he wants to do. And so that's a big part in the psychological suppression of our own people. So I know it's a tangent, but look, I'm just saying, right? I know a lot of people say they're open-minded, but I'm not married to any particular theory. And also, I will examine any theory. Doesn't mean that I have to believe it's true. But I also am happy to not know whether something is true or not, and remain in a sort of quasi-Schrodinger's cat state of it might be and it might not be simultaneously type thing. Do you know what I mean? So I take no offense by any theory, as long as somebody is not just sort of saying, I believe this, but refuses to back it up, or will imply I'm stupid if I don't agree with them, but offers nothing to support or substantiate what they're saying. Anyway, I'm not saying you're doing that. So just trying to lay out, I suppose, what I believe is the right ethos to have if you want to genuinely have discussions or whatever, or get to the truth. Anyway, I also like the fatigue thing. I like the meme that's been going for the last while about fatigue. Oh, and Alan Harker's there. There's no business, of course, like the show of business. Lily says, I have them fatigue. Yeah, and of course you can be fatigued about lots of different thems all at once. You don't just have to have fatigue for one person or people. Who is behind, and what is that? Mandani. Oh, yes. I know him, yeah. Who was pushing one. Anyways, yeah, they would push. And what is he? Is he an Indian via Do no way. What's that African country? Idi Amin was from there. Why can't I think of it? But anyway, I think his family came from there. Or he might have even been born there, even though he's Indian, but whatever. So I think he himself is probably you-know-who as well. I think they're able to be you-know-who's of any ethnicity. Anyway, looked fake. And as far as Charlie Kirk's thing, I mean, look, I do think I'm saying 49% at least he could be alive still. Or 50-50, I don't know. And I'm fine with not knowing, and I enjoy a good whodunit as well, even though I don't really like being in the midst of a stupid Clue, or Cluedo as we call it over the side Atlantic game, or whodunit. Stupid movie. Hello to New Edge Designs there as well. It's great to have. Really, I appreciate to have you join my little live stream. Jack says, then after the psyop, good folks spend their lives going down rabbit holes that were a you-know-what-ish fairy tale. It's sick, I know. Yeah, look, there is a danger, of course, of spending your whole life investigating everything. And then, I do despair myself, all right, that so many people say, let me just investigate one more thing here, just one more thing. And it does seem like an excuse then for inaction. A bit like in that movie, in that film, The Life of Brian, where your one comes in and goes, Brian's been kidnapped, come on, help. And they go, yeah, no, we're still trying to sort our name, whether we are the Judean people's front of Judea. We'll table your motion to rescue Brian, right? After we get through all the rest of this stuff. Oliver Stone film of the film seals it, says Alan Hargreaves. Yes, except, and Oliver Stone, when I saw him on Rogan there a while ago, he does seem to be legit, but Stone is Stein, right? What do you mean Stone is Stein? Well, unless I'm very much mistaken, he is one too. And so he's going to leave out the whole Mossad you-know-what-ish. And it's not just Mossad, right? It's whatever. They can call themselves whatever name they are, but it's a gang that goes back, I think, to antediluvian times. Before time was time, I think they've been a gang. They know who they are. No matter what, ethnicity they maraud under. But anyway, look, I don't mean to be going down too many sidetracks here. I haven't even started the book yet. But look, I would say maybe this will be just my introduction, or I'll start properly tomorrow. I'll at least get a start on the book today. And I hope to continue if I have the... It's not just energy, it's perseverance and dedication, to be honest, and lack of, inertia that I will admit that I suffer from. I'm going to try and see if I can do it regularly now. It's sometimes the hardest thing to start something though, the way. So hopefully I can carry on with a bit of momentum. Jack says, I've explained at great length what I think. They erase my channels for my thoughts. Yeah. Look, I could see how difficult it was, and I made pretty much no difference to sharing one of your spaces or whatever. If anybody's in this space now and doesn't know that Jack lost his channel there recently enough, like in the last few weeks or now, he has got a new one there. So if you can search, and I can't search by Jack, but if you can, I can't see, Jack, what your, let's see, maybe I can do it this way here. Go to your channel. Yes, I can. And I'm just going to see now if I can find out what your actual handle is. Right, it's at Jack9-333. Oh, Jack, why did you trying to tell us there? But I think you're just being ironic. He's got 36 subscribers. So if you can go look for at Jack9-333, and at least get him over 50, then I think that's the threshold that they allow anyone to stream again. So try and do that, and Jack will be hopefully then able to stream again. If you're not following his latest iteration there, or latest respawn, So yeah, Christian there confirms. He says, yeah, Stone is Stein. And Stein is German for stone, but unfortunately they really hollowed them out for the inside so much that anytime you just hear what were once, I suppose, proper just German words or names are now indicative of them, but we all know that, and here we are. So, yeah. Oh, I tell you what, I can do that. You don't just have to search for it. Can I? Yes, I'll paste it in. I should be able to do that. So, yeah, it gives me this long channel link, but I think that'll work. So if I paste this in here, maybe, and you know what I should be doing actually? Yes, he'll be able to leave a link if I make him a moderator now. Can I do moderator through OBS? Let's see. I think maybe yes, I can. Yes. Okay, hopefully that'll take effect now pretty soon. And sorry for not thinking of that earlier, but you know, I suppose it's a while since I've done lives, and I'm still actually getting used to OBS as well. So I did that through OBS, so hopefully that'll take effect there. And oh, I see Lily was already a moderator, so great. Now I'll just finish reading this other bit of Wikipedia, even though you could go and read it yourself, but I think it's relevant, right? So this is about Michael Collins Piper's, and by the way, there's still lots of recordings of his, and they are fantastic. And of course, he was denounced as a far-right, anti-Semitic, and all this sort of stuff, right? Anyway, but it's, as we now know, like, I mean, it's a conference of I suppose this guy is the real deal, if that's what they're doing normally. But anyway, his radio show, anyway, it says in February 2006, he started a radio show called The Piper Report. Regular guests have included Mark Glenn, a critic of Israel, former candidate for Texas state legislature, Barbara Samuelson. That sounds, but you never know. And Christopher Bollin, Bollyn, who occasionally filled in for Piper. Piper commented about the war on Lebanon, the Mel Gibson affair, in which he derided Gibson, not for what he said, but for driving under the influence and for apologising for his statements, right? Because although Mel Gibson is totally based, he did walk back what he said. He said, oh, I was drunk and blah, 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 and I shouldn't have said what I said, and it was maybe the wrong way of going about what I said, something to those effects, you know. But he shouldn't have, as we now know, never apologise. And the battle between US Senator Joe Lieberman, Democratic from Connecticut, I think, and later Independent from Connecticut, if CT is Connecticut, is that right? And businessman Ned Lamont on August 8th, 2006. Lamont defeated Lieberman in the Democratic primary, but lost to him in the general election. Piper defended alternative medicine, animal rights, and the past activities of Liberty Lobby and Willis Carto. He was featured as a guest on James Edwards' radio show, The Political Cesspool, which has also been accused of promoting anti-Semitism. According to will I read this? Okay, I guess so. According to Piper in Final Judgment, the missing link in the JFK assassination controversy, Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion orchestrated the assassination after learning that Kennedy planned to keep Israel from obtaining nuclear weapons, assuming, for the sake of discussion, that they exist. All right. Piper claimed that the assassination was a joint enterprise conducted on the highest levels of the CIA in collaboration with organised crime. And by the way, I might as well say to you that I recently put up on my Odyssey channel there a recording of a space that I recorded from X, from X.com. And in it, a CIA whistleblower, right, who himself is Greek, but was he really Greek? I think he is, again. I think he is, yes, of the tribe. And look, I don't know if, I know a lot of people don't like to say that there's good ones, okay, but maybe it's a small list, and maybe Bobby Fischer's on that list, and maybe there's some others like Benjamin Friedman. Who knows, right? But I put on my Odyssey anyway, if you're interested to hear it, and it's just a fact that he said it, that this CIA whistleblower, what was his name now? Michael, I have to look it up now, God, sorry. Sorry, not Michael, John Kiriakou. he said that the CIA was always Mossad's bitch, right? So there was significant overlap. What's the difference? One was infiltrated, or CIA was certainly infiltrated by them anyway. But maybe there was internal rivalries like there would be between departments in any corporation. And above the CIA and Mossad, you can be sure that there's some other controlling organisation, as there is in any sort of corporate structure, which is like the structure of a pyramid or rings within rings. But interesting to hear him say out loud there, John Kiriakou, who's definitely been doing the rounds over the last few months. But he was talking to Syrian girl there anyway, and has been talking to her previously, and will be again, no doubt. But he said it in answer, about minute 20 there of that thing. It's on my Odyssey and Rumble, I think you'll find it as well. He said, when he was asked, like, who was really sort of in charge of things, his reply was essentially that Mossad was. And he did use those words. He said, I don't mean to sound indelicate or crude or crass, but he said, I always felt, although he worked nominatively for the CIA, he said, I always felt that the CIA was Mossad's bitch. Anyway, Piper claimed that the assassination was a joint enterprise conducted on the highest levels of the CIA in collaboration with organised crime. And most specifically, it says, with direct and profound involvement by the Israeli intelligence service, the Mossad. Piper also alleged that the Jewish mobster Meyer Lansky and the ADL were linked to the murder. The ADL responded with harsh criticisms, called the claims ridiculous, and denounced Final Judgement as anti-Semitic. Piper wrote articles in American Free Press which alleged that the Mossad and FBI conspired to set up the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. That doesn't mean, of course, that he was our guy or even a good guy, or even not a fraud, but just that maybe you could say similar to Charlie Kirk. He maybe had started to become a problem, or started to go off the script a little bit. And they said, right, well, we already own you. We're not going to have our puppets decide to speak for themselves. We'll speak for you, right? And even the fact that you might be starting to get ideas about yourself means that you've outlived your usefulness. So I think that's, if, you know, let's suppose, for the sake of argument, Martin Luther King Jr. and Charlie Kirk are dead. Let's suppose, right? Let's assume, just for the sake of discussion. I think that's the most likely, that they both outlived their usefulness and had started to become little upstarts, as far as their handlers or, you know, controllers, their owners, were concerned. Anyway, Piper claims this was motivated by fear of King's anti-Israel statements, combined with his massive grassroots power. Yeah, if the pets start to turn, especially if they've got a momentum of people who will follow them, it's dangerous. They need to be gotten rid of. Yeah, I mean, I'll just take back, because, yeah, there's a few other things here. I'll just say this before I forget, that Piper's death was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And you might have seen, it was released, I think, just before the Christmas, or running up to Christmas week there. It wasn't a perfect movie. And Frank De Silva did write some books, what he calls the Red Book and the Black Book, or maybe it's the Black Book and there's two red books, about the Silent Brotherhood, the Bruder Schweigen, which is German for the Silent Brotherhood. The film, I think, was just called The Brotherhood, and it was about these events on Whidbey Island, when the was it FBI or CIA? Anyway, sorry, what I'm getting off the subject here. I think they must have had people who lived there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I think there was something about that territory there in the Pacific Northwest that they wanted to maybe try to set up more and more white people living together. And also maybe there was also people who had said, well, we can have enclaves there or whatnot. But there was something about Coeur d'Alene as a sort of a nexus point as well, I think, for a lot of these people meeting up there. But Michael Collins Piper, anyway, he died there. His body was discovered. And just the wording of it there, of his death, body was discovered on May 30th or May 31st, 2015. at the Budget Saver Motel in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The deputy coroner's report stated that the cause of death was a probable myocardial infarction. I read that out already anyway. So I'll just check back with the comments here, and yeah, I know I was talking to Lily about this before as well, and she knows all about it. Now Jack says Piper died at 54, no autopsy. It says in Wikipedia there was an autopsy, but I mean maybe it was a rigged autopsy. I don't know, but I won't argue with you about it. And you know, of course, it's not as if I believe everything that Wikipedia has listed there, but in any case. Christian and Resurrection says, have you heard about Austin Osman, Spare and Crowley? Alistair Crowley, yeah. Austin Osman rings a vague bell. I don't remember offhand though. Yeah, cool, Jack, about the hitting 50 you'll do live. That's great. Hopefully it'll happen. I know, by the way, on X I started up 2 accounts, not trying to evade anything. Neither have been banned yet, but I got to the first one I started up, I got to around 1800. I'm nearly 1900 now, in fairly quick order. Followers, as they call there. And then the other one I started about 3 months later, I think, and I got to around, I think, 2100, maybe a bit more, and it's actually dropping off. I mean, I lose followers all the time, every day, but you know, it's clear looking at others there, like they allow you to get to a certain amount of followers, and then you can't hardly gain any. It's amazing. So there's definitely, as we know, it's no surprise, there's definitely suppression going on, you know, as kind of a soft censorship. But that's X. But anyway, by the by. What I'll do is, I think, because, you know, I won't go too long, but maybe I'll see if I can go another half hour, let's say, anyway, right? We'll see how we go. I did open on this page. I thought I'd use it as sort of a thumbnail here. But this is page 399, which is almost bang center at the beginning of the book here. Just showing top secret, and it's called a DNR, which I thought is very interesting because DNR and DRAM, I wonder what DNR means. I'll have to look it up, but I won't go distracted and go look that up now. But I take it from the context of this thing. It says maybe it's like a message or a telegram or a missive or something that you send, or maybe just a receipt or something. But it's a unit of currency in at least one Middle Eastern or North African country. A dinar, isn't it? And I know DRAM is in the UAE, but maybe dinar is Saudi Arabia, and I'm guessing maybe would it have been Libya? Anyway, don't know. But it probably means something more literally. But it's like a telegram. Syrians claim Zionist, and maybe dinar is also the currency in Syria as well. Syrians claim the Zionists are responsible for death of President Kennedy. That's on the 29th of November, 63. So just 1 week afterwards. So the theory was out there pretty quick. But they're able to, I suppose, make these kind of things go away or not be popularly known. And I'll just read this out before going to the beginning, right? Shown above are top secret US intelligence reports, only recently declassified, that reveal that just days after the JFK assassination, official Arab government newspapers were openly suggesting the assassination could be traced to Israel and the Mossad. Clearly, these are the little known and quite well suppressed, right? Some things never change. And then, in air quotes, ugly rumours circulating overseas that the Warren Commission was determined to squelch. And, you know, just like you have with everything, whether it's the Warren Commission or whether you have, there was something I was looking at there recently where some people who were on some tribunal or inquiry or whatever. Oh, it was the inquiry in Britain into the grooming gangs, that some people who were on it have already resigned from it because they're saying, listen, we're being railroaded, or as I once did a live stream on, they're trying to use the Delphi method on us. In other words, they know, the powers that be, what conclusion they want out of this tribunal inquiry, and they're just going to set up this tribunal of inquiry for the next 5 years to do the rope-a-dope metaphorically speaking, so that everybody just gets worn out hearing about it and assumes, well, listen, they're looking into it. And 5 years later, when there's a whole new government and everything else, they come back and they go, yeah, no, we found it was some guy and he's dead now anyway, and he did it, so bye, and everyone's like, that was years ago, ancient history, why don't we just move on, it is what it is, and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, had Americans, and so yeah, whether it's the Warren Commission or 9/11 or the way it goes, it's just always the way. Had Americans heard these rumours, they might have started investigating JFK's policy towards Israel and discovered the Mossad did have the motive, means and opportunity, the three essentials for the crime. In my own parentheses there, like an engine, where they have fuel, compression and a spark. Means, motive and opportunity, or motive, means and opportunity to collaborate in the JFK assassination. In recent years, Syrian Defense Minister Mustafa, and it looks like Tlas, Mustafa Tlas, or however you pronounce that, declared publicly on Syrian television that he believed there was a Mossad role in the JFK assassination. I think I've seen that clip. Maybe some of you guys have too as well. I bet you it's on YouTube actually. I'll leave it there because that's just, there's lots of other sort of photographs and captions with them. So I'll go back to the beginning and actually read from the blurb, but I just say there's a few of the comments there. Maybe I'll just check. Central intelligence is magic. Yeah, I suppose, says Alan Hargreaves. Jack says, I got X and it was kicked off by the same day, really? Wow, when was that? Was that after, I just sort of joined, it's a bit more than a year now, actually, it's probably a year and a half. But, I actually get less traction now than really when I first started on either posts or anything else, So, I suppose you're supposed to. I'm a little less enamored of it now, and I suppose that's the idea. You're supposed to get sick of it or get tired of it or feel that what's the point in bothering if nobody ever gets to see what you put out, And psychologically speaking, that's more effective probably than just banning it outright, So, and I have to say, of course, I did catch a lot of your lives, or at least some of them I would catch the end and then I'd scroll back to the beginning while you were still live, but I wouldn't be, listening to you live, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I think you do. And I have to say, for a long time, I was like, how is Jack getting away with this? But look, I guess after a while they said, nah, we'll flip the switch, Anyway. We all have anti-semantics or whatever, Jack says, I got X the day of the Charlie Kirk hoax and was calling it a psyop, and then you were gone immediately. That's impressive. I have to say, that is impressive. Osman Spare, says Krishna, helped invent CIA with Crowley's teachings. Ah, yes. Did I read that in this book? Maybe I skated over it and that's why the name rang a bell. I don't know. Or maybe I saw it elsewhere. There's a thing called the Briggs, no, not Briggs-Meyer. What is it? I'll have to, the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, where once you sort of hear something, you start seeing it everywhere or hearing it everywhere. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'll do is I'll read the beginning of this book, including the sort of introduction and brief reviews, because it's funny. I think it's definitely funny, and you can see the sense of humour that Michael Collins Piper had. So here's the first, you could say these is like the pages even before the foreword or whatever there might be, Final Judgment is beyond question the most controversial, and he has controversial in air quotes here, and certainly the most widely denounced book on what is perhaps the most written about subject in American history. Yet most of those who have so hysterically condemned this book have never even read it. Yeah, exactly. Don't go looking at that. Oh, it's too controversial. controversial radio talk show host, Michael Collins Piper. And it's meant to be a pejorative. And it's meant so that right-thinking people or ordinary, decent citizens say, I'm lazy and I didn't want to have to go to the effort of reading it. And so I won't, because my betters will tell me if I need to read it. Oh, it's too controversial. Oh, he's too controversial. He's dividing people instead of uniting people. He should be uniting people rather than being so controversial. Right. I hear he's a conspiracy theorist. You know, this kind of thing. So it's an excuse for people like myself at one stage to just kind of say, yeah, no point in reading that then if they're telling me that it's just a crazy conspiracy theorist. Anyway, critics viciously attack the author, but they refuse to debate him. Again, we recognise that the same tactics all the time. They throw mud, but they refuse to get into the details and actually have a proper debate or discussion about it, about the details of the actual content of the charges. They always attack the character. They always play the man, not the ball, you know. So this is the one book on the JFK assassination that no major publisher dared print. Despite all this, those open-minded individuals who have dared to read Final Judgment, including some very well-known names, have concluded that this book is the one book that most completely outlines the entirety of the conspiracy that took the life of John F. Kennedy. Final Judgment presents what the author, Michael Collins Piper, calls the other side of the jigsaw puzzle. The long-ignored but otherwise freely available details, all found in mainstream, he has in, again, inverted commas or air quotes, literature, which present a stark new light on the circumstances surrounding JFK's assassination. This book demonstrates the strong likelihood Israel's intelligence service, the Mossad, collaborated alongside the CIA and the Meyer-Lansky crime syndicate in the JFK assassination because President Kennedy was working to prevent Israel from acquiring nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Right? He has it there, literally. The old weapons of mass destruction. So if anybody really did have them, it wasn't the Iraq and such. It was the Israel. Assuming, again, right, in parentheses, I say, for the sake of argument, or for the sake of discussion, or for the sake of investigation, assuming, let's say, we'll put it on the back burner, that nukes exist at all. Okay. Anyway, reading on. However, because it was not until the mid-1980s that the truth about President Kennedy's behind-the-scenes war with Israel emerged, many otherwise diligent JFK assassination researchers never considered the possibility Israel did have good reason to align with other powerful forces that wanted to remove JFK from the White House. So they all had strong motives, like whether it was the CIA, because JFK apparently threatened them to, didn't he famously say, was it split them into 1,000 pieces and cast them to the four winds or something like that? Also the secret societies, you know, whatever Freemasonic orders, you know, he gave that, was it in the Waldorf Hotel or some famous hotel? I know he gave a speech about how secret societies were bad, and you know, proper democracies don't do deals in secret and all this sort of stuff. So everybody had a motive, and LBJ had a motive. He wanted to be president. He knew he was next in line. It was just like the story of Macbeth. This king was in his way, and then he would inherit the throne. And so many of them, and maybe even what's her name, Jackie Onassis, knew that he was having an affair with Marilyn Monroe and didn't like the fact that she was publicly embarrassed that, you know, this sultry dame was singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" to him, and she felt that this, if I can maybe just, you know, again, like there's never going to be any proof of this, can't prove what was inside her mind, but you could imagine that a woman scorned, the hell hath no fury like one. And we might say, but why would a wife or a woman ever wanted to assassinate her husband? She was so loving to him in public. You just never know what goes on, not just behind closed doors, but inside the confines of a woman's mind. Maybe she was quite happy to play whatever part her part was, you know. And I know a lot of people say it wasn't the driver that turned around and shot him, it was her. Maybe it was both of them. Who knows, right? And so I'm open to anything. And maybe, again, all of this is old hat to most of you. No doubt. But anyway, back to this here anyway. They all did it, right? So the book demonstrates the strong likelihood that Israel's intelligence service, the Mossad, collaborated alongside the CIA and the Mar-a-Lansky crime syndicate in the JFK assassination because President Kennedy was working to prevent Israel from acquiring nuclear weapons of mass destruction, a fact that remained a dark secret for decades. However, because it was not until the mid-1980s that the truth about President Kennedy's behind-the-scenes war with Israel emerged, many otherwise diligent JFK assassination researchers never considered the possibility Israel did have good reason to align with other powerful forces that wanted to remove JFK from the White House. Once you've read Final Judgment, you will see the evidence of likely Israeli involvement is there. Although first published in 1994, only one newspaper, a small Washington-based weekly, even mentioned the book. Despite that, Final Judgment has now sold more, and this we're talking back in, I think, whenever this was published. Well, will I skip ahead just to see this? Maybe this was published in 2005. It says soft cover, second printing, 2005. So, despite that, Final Judgment has now, we're going to guess by 2005, sold more than 40,000 copies, achieving, I think it's meant to be, the proverbial status of underground, again in air quotes, bestseller. Yet most Americans never heard of this groundbreaking historical bombshell or of its controversial thesis. And look, even now, you or you guys in the chat would probably say that even though we can all see that it's going far more mainstream, certainly appears to be. On YouTube comments I can see, it's basically all over on YouTube comments as well as on X. And I don't think it's just that I'm stuck in whatever algorithmic, echo chamber that they put you into, or silo. I think there's a bit more to it than that. I think a lot of people know, and I think a lot of normies are getting to the cusp of knowing or perceiving that everybody knows this thing, that it's not just them having this terrible realization, right? I don't think that a lot of them have already thought about or revisited the JFK assassination with this new lens of looking back and kind of going, oh, right. Because once you have the sort of, it's like the Rosetta Stone or the Codex to go back and look at things, or, you know, the different lens or the way of looking at things, the new perspective on the world. You kind of go, oh, right. Everything really is a plot with them at it every single time, as you say. You go looking down the rabbit hole, as we now know. It's a wonderful way of putting it, and I find it works wonders with the normies. If you just leave it to them to work it out, that the further you go down the rabbit hole, eventually the T in rabbit hole becomes silent. And a lot of normies have kind of gone, yeah, at me like that. And then later on, they said, oh, I know what that means. So I don't know why they thought it was funny, because they didn't get it at the time. Others, I think, did, or I thought they did. And then later on, they went, oh, yeah, it's a rabbit hole. So that one seems to work, as a lot of people would still say, how do you ever explain any of this to a normie or get them to not have that programmed reflex reaction to discovering that, oh my God, I'm talking to a literal, whatsy. And, because they're very much programmed. It's like a, buckaroo, you think you can place more and more on the donkey. And all these things, I think, like games are metaphors for so much like this in life, like musical chairs, for inflation or inflating the currency, and pass the parcel, you're left holding this sort of poisoned chalice. Or, everyone's always sort of trying to spread around themselves around less and less chairs until eventually there's one chair and no chairs. All these games are supposed to teach us something, but if you mention buckaroo, that game where you're trying to put more and more stuff on the mule or the donkey, and then it goes buckaroo. So that seems to be the way that when you're treating with normies a lot, Also, like, the electric fence or the hoop with the wire that you're trying not to touch the electric part and, follow the curved course of the wire. All these things are visual metaphors or analogies for trying to understand the way people work and life works, the way things, all these mysteries about the way people operate are. And so anyway, without trying to stretch it too much, if you can very gently place these things on some normies, it tends to work. They tend to accept it and then ride off with that new sort of weight of understanding on them. They accept it. Yeah, that seems to work. The T in rabbit hole becoming silent. They seem to want to get that as a joke and accept it as a joke, even if they don't understand it, but maybe later they work it out. I don't know. It's a curious one. Although I have to say, I have become despondent about ever really getting a critical mass of people. Most people will just, whatever they perceive to be the right opinion is whatever is the popular opinion they perceive to be, they say, well, that's the right opinion, and they'll just follow that. Most of our own guys, even if we say we love them, we don't, or I don't really, because they have no minds of their own. They've no principles they stick to. They just will do whatever they think is the popular thing, and they believe whatever they think is the popular thing, which is why it's so important to control the media. Anyway, I'll check a few more here before continuing with the introduction there from the book. Jack says, sent you a few, maybe you're not talking to me, maybe you're talking to somebody else, sent you a few pics of the latest job, bro. In reality, the tribe had been setting up for the eventual takeover of America, and I think they set up the JFK psyop so people would be gutted and searching for answers. Yeah, I mean, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't with a lot of these things as well. And I feel like that way, look, you got to make a choice, or you got to look into things, but I do become full of despair. And I think part of it is just learning to climb back out of that eventually, of the dark well of despair. By the way, going live does help, and I have to say, like, as I mentioned earlier, there's a sort of inertia, an unwillingness on my part to move and actually get everything ready and, prepared, and, get the little picture there on the left and get the PDF of the book up and have it squared or whatever I want it to be, this kind of way. Set up the live stream in advance and then get on with it, even though I don't feel like I want to. I feel like it's like going for a walk. You'll feel better afterwards, even though it's hard to get off the couch and go walking. You know what I mean? So this does give me more energy than I would have had beforehand, before I started. So I appreciate you guys. It's another way of saying I appreciate being able to discuss this stuff with you online, as it were. So Lily says, I must spend more time at Odyssey. Yeah. I mean, I've been continuing to put stuff there, but I still have a lot of stuff that I haven't put up there. Sometimes I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I say, it's not right. I need to edit that and not waste the listener's time. Cut it down to just less than a half an hour, whatever it might be, But other times it's best to just get it up, even if it's not perfect. Because once you kind of let a few weeks go by, you're onto something else, and the way it goes. Anyway, so I'll skip forward now. Funny enough, because this is faithfully reproduced by machine scanning the book into PDF, this is essentially reading the inside cover, so I have to skip all the way to the end to get the other side, or other part of the book, the back cover. Page 767, I think it is, from memory, right, on this PDF that I'm reading. Not that you need to know that. So continued from inside cover. However, on August 21st, 1997, newspapers across the United States, echoing a report that first appeared in the Los Angeles Times newspaper, told the story of an uproar over a scheduled lecture at a small California college by Michael Collins Piper, the author of Final Judgment. And again, some things never change, and we can see the parallels. Not that I'm saying that these two people were of similar character or of similar value or estimation in that regard, but you can see the parallels between Charlie Kirk and Michael Collins Piper. And again, the same proviso goes. But for any of those people who are on the supposed right wing, even Ben Shapiro, or people like Jordan Peterson, but any of these people, right? It just goes to show what a psyop, they have the right defending their right to speak, and the left trying to prevent them from speaking because they're dangerous, far right, even though you know the same as myself, right? Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. Laughable now, although there was a time when both of those were quite celebrated. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'll read on. The point is the parallels there. You still had Antifa, or whatever they might have called themselves at the time, having protests, trying to prevent people just from lecturing or having scheduled appearances at colleges just to speak. Pro-Israel pressure groups were working overtime to prevent Piper from being heard. They feared college students would be too impressionable and might actually take Piper's thesis seriously. I mean, I pause there and I'll read it again because I've read it out that a few times now, and it just blows my mind, the audacity, the chutzpah of them. And we accept this kind of, I was going to say a rude word there, but this on its face nonsense, self-contradictory argumentation. The pro-Israel pressure groups worry that college students would be too impressionable and take Piper's thesis seriously. And assuming from their point of view that whatever Collins Piper was saying was crazy and obviously wouldn't be taken seriously by anybody who had a discerning mind or a mature mind. Let's give them that for the sake of argument. Then why would we send anybody to college if they don't have the wherewithal to be able to discern for themselves what is something that is a fact that they should pick up and retain, or subject matter they should learn and understand? How could they understand anything or judge the value of any piece of information if they are at the same time saying, well, they're too impressionable at that age? We wouldn't want somebody going in there and saying something to them that we think is wrong. Well, how would they prevent any of the lecturers or professors or any of that in the college? You know what I mean? It's facile to argue this. How would they make sure that all these guys were teaching in all their subjects and all their aspects of their subject everything that was totally correct? And how could they trust any of the students to go reading anything in the library or finding information themselves if these poor students were just hapless little lemmings with no minds of their own who would just look at anything, read anything and absorb it and come to erroneous conclusions unless they had the guiding hand of these pro-Israel pressure groups or other people to prevent them from picking up facts that were wrong because they're too impressionable? It's all a nonsense. There's no utility in college then. But they got away with this and still get away with this kind of nonsense argumentation. And so the more I think about these things, the more disgusted I am with not only my own people now, but people my parents' age then, and on backwards, right? That they stood for this, and I'll say it, bullshit on its face, you know? Anyway, I'll read on and finish the introduction here. Piper was being attacked for daring to speak the truth, the little-known fact that JFK had been embroiled in a bitter, then secret, conflict with Israel over its drive to build a nuclear arsenal, weapons of mass destruction. I do think it's very interesting that this triggering, deliberately so, very key phrase, this hypnotic phrase, this phrase designed to bring out or... it's like what is it when they brainwash you and they have, it's not just a trigger phrase, is that what they call it? The phrase anyway that brings out the pre-programmed reaction in you. You go, oh no, weapons of mass destruction, oh better go to the government, switch on the news and find out what they're going to do about it to protect us. But yet it's very much to do with MK Ultra brainwashing. It's one of those phrases, and we all know Bibi has been telling us that Iran or Syria or whoever else in the list of countries for the Project for the New American Century was engaged in creating. They're only weeks away from creating weapons of mass destruction that will be capable of reaching every European city. And by these, what do they call them? Intercontinental ICBMs. New York, Miami, all this. So Bibi was telling Congress or whoever would listen in the UN or New York or wherever it might be, or the Senate in Washington, that they were weeks away from developing or enriching uranium, creating weapons of mass destruction, all this, doing it since the 90s. Anyway, and the 80s probably, I mean. What made this, I better continue, what made this so objectionable to the Israeli lobby was that, in Final Judgment, Piper had documented that there were multiple connections of Israel's intelligence service, the Mossad, to many key players, often linked in, and I know, by the way, I read this out in Wikipedia, but this is where Wikipedia got it from, the introduction to this book, Final Judgment, to many key players, often linked in other widely known books on the subject, to the JFK conspiracy, a point missed or deliberately suppressed by others who had studied the assassination over the years, whether the CIA or the mafia, right, the mafia, in air quotes, or the right wing, in inverted commas, or heavy air quotes, or the military industrial complex, again, in quotation marks, you name it, right? And again, it's all just ways of saying the same thing. It's the same gang, the immortal gang, the eternal gang. The gang, the Cosa Nostra, but it's not Italian. The Cosa Nostra. You name it. Piper demonstrates that the Mossad connection is there, and that's why his thesis is so controversial, right? Controversial. If you initially have any doubts about this thesis, the author himself suggests you first take a look at the comprehensive photo section, which summarizes the book, and then take it from there if you dare. And so maybe, I mean, you did see as I started out this live stream with the section there of the Syrian government's telegram within a week saying they thought it was the Mossad. So what I'll probably do is maybe I'll start there from a jumping off point next week. Or sorry, not next week, tomorrow, if I can do it. But next live stream anyway will be ASAP. But I'll finish off the introduction here. I'll just check back here. I saw some more comments go by and just want to read a few before I let too many go by. Yeah, I'm just scrolling back here. Did I read this already? In reality, the tribe had been setting up for the eventual takeover of America. And I think they set up the JFK PSYOP so people would be gutted and searching for answers. I did read that. Stephen says, hello, Stephen Crumley. He says, Jack's words can't describe how perfect that is. That's a lifetime of effort and attention to perfection. And there's Logan Garviel. Greetings, he says. Greetings, Logan. Yeah. Alan says all platforms are going to be, whatever, suppressed soon. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely, I think, tell that X has dialed up the soft censorship on us. By the way, Linda Yaccarino left in July, resigned apparently. Who knows what the full story is? I don't know if it's been made public. There might have been some coincidental things going on at the same time, I forget now, but she has gone to EMED, I think it is, a public health agency or organization of some kind. I think it's got government contracts, US government contracts. And so she's the, I think, CEO of that now. So again, brace yourselves, right? I mean, they can do another convid anytime they want. And I think, it could be imminent. Who knows? Could be before the year is out. Could be early next year. Who knows? But I mean, like, it was all foretold, like in all the movies and what do they call them? Predictive programming type things in movies. And whatever else. There was, at the time, there'd be another one in 2025 or thereabouts. Convid the movie returns, part 2. This time it's extra personal, whatever. So she's best placed now to play a good role in that. And yeah, they say she's Italian, but I don't think so. Does it say on her I think it does say on her Wikipedia that she is a you-know-who as well. But it's very obvious. I mean, again, none of us, I don't think, need the early life section anymore. Like, you can just tell. It's not even by looking at them. You can tell by listening to their voice, just the way they talk, the argumentation they make, the spurious logic they use. It's just, you know them by their fruit, you know? Yeah. Lily there says, I wasn't allowed on a plane without the special new ID. Really? Right. So I had to drive Seattle to New York and back. Wow. Jeez, you're brilliant. You're brilliant at that. Very resourceful. Look, I mean, I think us non-Americans tend to forget how huge America is, you know, going from width to width there. It's such a massive journey. I mean, because, you know, longest journey I've made some long car journeys from Ireland, got the boat through from Ireland to England or to Wales, then England, and then driven from France down to Spain or Portugal or Italy. Like, to me, that's a massive journey. Other Eastern Europeans now, who I used to work with, like say from Hungary, they would say that they drive all the way from Hungary through Poland or Germany through France, maybe the Netherlands, and on back to Ireland. Like, that's, to me, that's massive. That's incredible. But that's nothing compared to Washington State to New York State. Just incredible. Anyway, it's all by the by, but yeah, I'm very amazed and impressed. But the point is the ID, and yeah, look, they're already saying to us, Keir Starmer in the UK, we're going to do digital ID, you're going to accept it. And I saw a recent thing on X there, a clip of him being interviewed by some diversity interviewer, and on BBC or ITV or whatever it was, and she said, will people be fined if they don't get an ID? And he said, oh no, we won't fine them. There'll just be a charge of 80 to 90 pounds sterling if they want to do this, that or the other, but they don't have a phone to have their digital ID on. We'll just charge them for the administration fees. That's the common thing that they always get around. Oh, there's no fine. It's just, if you don't comply in the way that we tell you to do this thing, then we charge this ridiculous, exorbitant administration fee. But it's not a fine. You know, so that's the way they do it. And then you'll get most of our own idiots going, no, I mean, you need to get into the 21st century. Why don't you go along? Look, everyone's doing it. You can't fight against it. It's progress. It's technology. Technology is going to be the way it's going to be. So you might as well get on board. You can't fight big government. And you'll get most of our own guys as well, who will say, like, I'll fight. I'll never accept it. Come to my house and we'll talk about it and all this sort of stuff. All those guys, 99% of them, they'll comply, and they'll be the very ones saying, you need to get on board. You can't just be a stick in the mud and stay in the past forever and all this sort of stuff, you know. But call me a cynic, but you know the way, that's the way it is. If you keep your expectations low about people, you know, the sting of disappointment at least won't be so surprising. But you might be pleasantly surprised occasionally if people don't capitulate completely, but fair play to you anyway, Lily. I'll finish this off, and then I'll just read this anyway because it's on point of what I was just reading about or talking about as a tangent. Krishnan says, it's further from LA to New York than London to New York. Wow, that's a great stat. Yeah. So it's further distance from LA to New York than it is the whole distance laterally of the Atlantic Ocean. Incredible. And then some, and then the Irish Sea or English Channel, whatever. No, Irish Sea, yeah. And the whole width of England and Wales. So amazing, absolutely amazing. It just goes to show you, America is massive. Look, at one time I could have said it's the greatest nation on earth, both in terms of the sheer size. Everything's bigger and better, not just in Texas, but America. And in many ways, we all did feel minuscule, but now we're all equally in the fucking gutter, aren't we? Nothing to be proud of. And I know it stings, especially for Americans who used to be so patriotic, but anyway. It's now a competition these days to sort of say, you'll never guess how corrupt our government is. Oh yeah, well that's nothing. Never guess what our government is doing to our own people, you know. Anyway, as I say, I'll finish this off. Just the introduction, we'll leave it there then. So, In recent years, as word about the explosive revelations appearing in Final Judgement began to circulate worldwide, demand for the book became so immense that second-hand copies were selling on the internet for as much as $185 per copy. And you got to remember now, this was $185 either in the 80s or 90s, or certainly at 2005 at the latest. And so, I mean, you're talking hundreds of dollars, if not maybe 1,000, who knows, going by inflation again. Anyway, demonstrating the drastic need for republication of a new, easily accessible edition of this important work. Yeah, at least Lily says equally in the gutter. I think you guys know, right? It's no offense to anybody, right? I don't have any national pride in my own people. Certainly not my own government. It's not my government. But most of my own people greatly disappoint me. And I think we can all understand that no matter what nation you're from. Alan says, what about, or how about a stream on Calergy? Well, maybe you do one. What exactly that means to you. But it's a very broad topic. You could just say the Calergy ban just signifies, in a way, it's shorthand for everything that we see as well. The deflation of our currency, the deflation of the value of our people, the eroding of our nation, the eroding of everything that we ever thought was true or real or genuine. It's all being debased. So it's a broad topic, but I mean, if you start one, it's too broad anyway, I would say. But I can't help going off into little tangents, as I do, from just even reading things like this, and from what I must have said, reminded you of the Calergy. I interpreted it meaning the deterioration, debasement, and devaluation, and of course, what would you say, deracination, maybe, to say the mixing of the races until there's nothing distinct about anybody anymore anyway. While the major media continues to ignore Final Judgement as much as is possible, a number of individuals whose expertise cannot be ignored have begun to publicly lend their support to the thesis, one which becomes all the more significant in light of growing global concern about the proliferations of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, right? Of course, the scare stories about them in wherever, Syria, Iran, Iraq, whatnot. But really, if they were being proliferated anywhere, it was, of course, in Israel. But of course, they always ostentatiously deny any knowledge about any of that. The author continues to ask, that was my parentheses, by the way, back to this. The author continues to ask other JFK assassination theorists to debate him publicly about the thesis of Final Judgement, and begs for his critics to demonstrate where he has misinterpreted facts or distorted the writings of others who have delved into the subject. But thus far, no one has come forth to do so. Again, 'tis always the way. Always the way. They refuse to debate on the substance of the work. And as he says here, they always either ignore his work or call him names. Again, this is always their modus operandi, always the way they operate. And again, you recognize them by their methods, by their fruit, by the way they carry on, by the way they conduct themselves. However, thousands of satisfied readers believe Michael Collins Piper has indeed pinned the tail on the donkey. So if you know that game as well, you blindfold somebody at a children's party usually, or maybe it's fun for adults if they're all having a bit of a jolly jape and having a few drinks and they're just having a bit of nice fun. If you just happen to pin the tail on the donkey, you might be, like in Mel Gibson, in fact, in the movie called Conspiracy Theory, just throwing a lot of darts, again, start stretching the metaphor, throwing a lot of darts on the wall, but eventually he'll hit a bullseye. So, but that phrase, pinned the tail on the donkey, might imply that Michael Collins Piper was shooting in the dark and eventually hit the target, but he wasn't just shooting in the dark. He had good reason for his thesis, but he didn't just arrive at his conclusion. He did look into it. And he was obviously very well read and had noticed, even back in the 90s or 80s, what I'll hold my hand up and say I only noticed I don't know when exactly, but I'll say in the last 10 years, within the last 10 years, I suddenly started to wonder whether there was this common theme. Whereas before, I'd never even bothered looking in their direction, you know? So it was as late as that, and it's embarrassing to say. No doubt everyone wants to sort of try to pretend, and you see it a lot on X. Oh, I've known for years, I've always been aware, I've always been awake to this thing, but I don't know. I think it's, a lot of people would like to brag that way. Anyway, once you've read Final Judgment, you'll never look at the JFK assassination in the same way again, he says. And there's a lot of errata or addendums here. But these it just goes to show his conscientiousness and his rigorousness and his, did I say conscientiousness? To his character. It's something good about his character where he's made little spelling mistakes, one word here or there, or he says here, one of the corrections, for example, is widely -read, but he should have it's not hyphenated, just widely read. So he's correcting himself little by little like this, and what page and paragraph they begin with, and he meant to put a square bracket instead of a round bracket or vice versa. So he's pedantic in a good way. It shows that he really cares about dotting every I and crossing every T and correcting it where he feels he might have made a mistake, or as I say, where there's even a tiny little thing that he wished he would have done better in a previous edition of the book. Anyway, here's the back cover of the book, and I'll finish on this because I think it was well worth reading. And it shows again something nice about his character. He had a good sense of humour, which I think maybe is sort of acerbic, doesn't take himself too seriously, but maybe he's also sardonic or cynical, which comes from years of finding out a lot of things that are unpleasant and being disappointed, not just in what you find out, but by reflection your own people and what they tolerate, or what they choose to ignore. Yes, it says in the back of the book here, you can judge a book by its critics. And as I say, if you think about, it's never true until it's confirmed by a you-know-who. And you haven't made it in the world of anti-Semitism, or you haven't made it in the world of conspiracy theorists until the ADL publicly criticises or denounces you. Here's what people are saying about Michael Collins Piper and the thesis of his phenomenal underground bestseller, Final Judgment. Novel, indeed. Manages to weave together some of the key threads in a tapestry that many say is unique. The Los Angeles Times, November 25th, 1996. Adds a new dimension to the question of just who done it. That's Robert Cutler. The Cutler name rings a bell. Somewhere I've been reading something about Cutler recently. I don't know where. Anyway, veteran JFK assassination researcher, Robert Cutler. Don't know if it was Robert Cutler or some other Cutler. I wonder if there's any relation. I can't think of where it was now, but anyway. Vicious intellectual licentiousness. So I'll have to look up licentiousness another time, but I think it's to do with a sort of, it's got a sexual connotation. It's a prurient thing. And I think a lot of us, we all do, I think maybe get a kick out of a good murder mystery. There's kind of the intrigue is almost like, oh, what's behind the curtain there? In the same way as you might go to a peep show and you go, oh, what's behind the curtain there, So there's that kind of adult entertainment idea to it, I think, as well. So vicious intellectual licentiousness. So I think it's, he's sort of putting a lot into that there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it by saying that it's a serious subject matter, but it's intriguing and in this sort of, ooh, wonder what's next kind of thing, page turner type thing with a frisson of delight even to finding out these terrible things. That's George E. Will, Newsweek, September 1st, 1997. Brilliant, says David Icke, former BBC, and we all know how David Icke, maybe a little bit unhinged, but even though I think I've seen him on X now recently, he is actually calling out the you-know-who's. I think I've seen a few comments from him. But I think for a long time he kept going, I'm just talking about lizards and intergalactic aliens. But even if you just take it as a metaphor, whatever, or that he's a little bit crazy, he's been very useful, or he's been a net positive overall. So anyway, yeah, former BBC broadcaster. He was a sports broadcaster, or, soccer commentator. But I think we might have been on BBC Grandstand. I was very young at the time. And then I did see him on David Icke on that famous interview with Terry Bogan, who is now deceased. He was Irish, by the way, even though he made it big, and he was one of the, if not the biggest television personality for most of the 80s, if not all of them, and early 90s on BBC. But anyway, outlandish says, but brilliant, said David Icke anyway about the book. Outlandish, said Gerald Posner. Now my tuning fork is going off with that name there, but anyway, the CIA sponsored author Gerald Posner is of Case Closed, who claims Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone assassin. So. Maybe Posner is indeed that kind of tuning fork type of person who worked for the official narrative people for the CIA. He said, no, it was this lone wolf, lone assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. Look, he was a commie. He did it. There you go. Case closed. Horrifying, says Professor Roy Bauer. Again, Bauer. Ding, ding, ding. But you just wouldn't know because it's a German name as well. Very common German name. But it was the original name of the Rothschilds. And it's, of course, the new name for Monsanto, which was one of the names that came out of IG Farben. But anyway, Irvine Valley College. Horrifying, says Professor Roy Bauer of Irvine Valley College. Maybe some of you people know that name. It doesn't ring a bell with me, I don't think. Here's a longer review from S.A., whoever S.A. is, of Newberry, Florida. Very compelling. It would have been easy for Michael Collins Piper to ignore the complete story, as others have done, and be rewarded with great reviews. Instead, Final Judgment explains for the first time the triangle of intelligence services that conspired to assassinate President Kennedy, and thus changed the course of history. And it really did. And by the way, these people, they don't just assassinate somebody for one reason, or because they have become upset by this person. They do it because they believe that it's going to be to their advantage historically. They're playing a very long chess game and they're very good at it. And they know exactly when to take up a piece off the chessboard or a player off the playing field. Whatever exactly it means to say that they take the player off the chessboard or off the field of play. Impressive, says CH, and he's from Toms River, New Jersey, whoever CH is. Impressive, an indispensable addition to JFK assassination literature, and may well be a capstone to it. So whoever CH was of Toms River in New Jersey, and I think that might be a sort of a special place on the map as well with regard to Toms River. I remember reading about that. Toms River. There's something special about the place, or meaningful about the way the river was called, about the history of the way the river was called, something like that. Anyway, whoever he was, he knew what he was talking about. The pyramid with the capstone on it. So, calling into mind Masonic imagery there. Just check here on the comments there. I'll just go back a bit. Jack says, all right, Wibbly Boost. I don't know if I know Wibbly Boost. If you're somebody who's new to my channel, welcome along if so. Or if you are like a respawn and chose a different name, I don't know. But welcome along. You say, everybody knows Lincoln shot Kennedy and vice versa. Well, actually, that Lincoln-Kennedy connection there, but when their secretaries, didn't Kennedy have a secretary called... Did he have a secretary called Lincoln? And then Lincoln had a secretary called Ford or something. I can't remember. But there was loads of these interesting coincidences between them. And anyway, I can't think of the good ones now. I'm sure you know them. But I remember reading about them long before there was an internet, when I was a child, about interesting facts, you know. So I read about that in the 80s. But yeah, these days, if Lincoln travelled forward in time to shoot Kennedy and created a paradox, and then Kennedy went back and got his revenge and shot Lincoln, dressed up as whatever the name of the... John Wilkes Booth, wasn't it? Was that the name? Who went into the Ford Theatre and this kind of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised. Nothing would surprise me anymore, and I doubt it would surprise any of you guys. Jack, I can hear him saying the same thing. Anyway, Wibbly Boost says, everyone knows Lincoln shot Kennedy. And Jack says, I have this book. All right. Well, I take it you mean Final Judgment. My dad turned me on to this guy. He was also a white nationalist, based individual. Yes, indeed. Maybe I missed the beginning. But that's what I was sort of saying when I was reading out of Wikipedia in connection to a lot of the white nationalists, you know, in the 80s there, who maybe would have met and gone to family get-togethers and meetings and barbecues and cookouts in Coeur d'Alene, or certainly around the Pacific Northwest, you know, in the summer times. So... yeah, more like missing link. Wobbly Boo says, Ike is a super shill, like everything from the BBC, not batting for your team. Yeah, I mean, I'm keeping an open mind still. I don't know anything definitive, but definitely open to whatever, how would you say, it doesn't have to be evidence, but whatever supporting arguments you have, or if you have any reference to things he said or whatever to support what you're saying there. But overall, so far, from what I've seen, I think he's been a net positive to, you know, getting people to think about things or look into these things, at least anyway. The shapeshifter thing makes me think metaphor or real. Yeah, exactly. Jack. Definitely Wobbly helped wake some people up, but it was only controlled opposition. Yeah, maybe he is. I'm definitely open to any of that. And Wibbly says, yeah, but that's the trick. Nobody would listen to him if he didn't reveal some actual dirt. BBC is basically an agency of MI5. Well, I totally agree with your last statement there. The BBC is basically an agency of MI5, as was George Orwell. And a lot of people said, oh, George Orwell then. And his friend who wrote about the 13 tribes of Israel? Whose name I forget now. Arthur. Oh, I forget. It was Arthur something, I think. Who committed suicide, and he was Arthur, whoever wrote the 13 tribes, or the 13th tribe. He was one. He was a J, and committed suicide. But maybe he was a good one. I don't know. Other people say, that whole real Israelis or the what is it called, a Christian identity. Oh, that's just controlled opposition, or it's another psyop. Who knows? To me, George Orwell and 1984 and Animal Farm, they're brilliant but works, and I think George Orwell was sincere, and I think he did try to warn us all. But anyway, I think he did realise that BBC was essentially whatever MI5 is or was, whatever is the intelligence service, the OSS and whatever, you know. So I agree with you anyway. BBC is an agency of MI5, yes. In the same way as CNN and Fox News and everything else. As Tucker Carlson did seem to definitively state in something I saw recently, is the CIA. Tucker said, I grew up in... it was about Bitcoin. I saw there recently a clip where he said, I grew up in Washington, D.C. in a CIA family. He said, essentially CIA. So he said, I know a psyop when I see one. He said, I think Bitcoin is a psyop. I think the CIA created it. And by the way, the name Satoshi Nakamoto, you've probably seen that thing where it's, what is it, Sanyo or Sony, Toshiba, Nakashimi, and is there something else? Anyway, you can say, oh yeah, they just got it out of these Japanese names that way. But also in Japanese, Satoshi means I don't know if I got the wrong way around here, but maybe it's Nakamoto means middle or medium or central. And Satoshi means intelligent. I think that's the right way around, so that it almost means in Japanese central intelligence, which is at the very minimum a bizarre coincidence, But anyway, I'm not telling people don't buy Bitcoin or do buy Bitcoin or do buy or do sell, but whatever. It's just, there seems to be no end to everything being fake and or gay, But all by the by, I'll finish up here now, these reviews in a second. Alan says, Magnus Hirschfeld. Yes, to do with the, what are they called? The, Weimar Republic anyway. And the, the school. Sometimes, it's just been live and you forget it, but you know what I'm talking about. And they went to Columbia University. Anyway, I've been subbed for ages, but not been here a long time. Okay, Wibbly Boost. I like Irish voices. I like Irish voices, though. Well, good, just as well. Been same name since 2008. Okay, well, great. Maybe I've seen you before and just forgot. Anyway, cheers for catching my live stream. Hopefully I'll finish up now in the next 10 minutes. Real Tommy says, never trust a mainstream journalist, mainstream media journalist, or former one. Orwell was also a journo. Yes, you're right. But you can't trust anybody totally. But as I say, from Orwell's body of work, and even just judging on 1984 alone, 1984, it is perfect. And while you never know anybody's motives, knowing about George Orwell's life, knowing about how he died and how he tried to write this thing while he was dying of TB, to me, I think it's pretty easy to understand his motivations, or to see that his motivations were driven by, I have to try to use the last bits of my own energy, not to get paid or become famous, because obviously that wasn't going to happen. He was dying. So I think he was trying to warn the world in as best way as he could, and basically tell on the BBC and expose them as being the CIA, and explain by metaphor how it was for him working for the BBC. But however, we don't have to argue about it, Wibbly Boo says, I stopped uploading. YouTube just takes down anything I put up. Yeah, he said at the Jack, and that's kind of why I haven't used YouTube in so long as well, because anything that I would say is going to involve getting as close as it makes no difference to the same thing that happens anytime you go down any rabbit hole, So I just figured, look, I'd rather not be always self-censoring myself, and getting very little traction anyway on YouTube, But look, I'm very glad for anyone that does watch my videos and comment on them. I really am. But I kind of figured I'd rather just, if I am in the mood to create a video, won't have to edit out words and spend ages trying to curate it for YouTube. You know the way it goes. But anyway, by the same token, this is why I decided to just try and do lives, and just, if I'm not going to use my channel, I might as well just use it until I can't. No more. Stephen Emma says, I wish I would have grabbed Bitcoin back in the day. Well, don't we all? By the way, and we all could have a story like this. My brother, one of my brothers, was mining it back in probably 2015, maybe earlier, maybe 2014, and it could have been even earlier. And I thought I knew more about computers than he did, and I thought I also was older and wiser. And I said, listen, that sounds like a scam. How's there any value in that? You're just wasting computer energy. It's going nowhere. It means nothing. How could it have any value? And he goes, well, everyone's into it, so, And of course, it doesn't have any value, but people believe it does, just like fiat. Anyway, I won't get distracted into the Bitcoin thing, because I know it's not quite as simple as that. But then I remember in 2016, a friend of mine said, oh yeah, a friend of mine, he's bought a lot now, and he's been trading it over the last few months, and he's earned thousands in it. You should get in on it now. And that's when it was, when it had gone from maybe a $10 to a few hundred. And I went, well, listen, if it's at a few hundred now, it's too late anyway. It's already burst its bubble, or it will burst its bubble. Like, I should have got in when it was 10 quid or 20 quid. But now, of course, any of us would go, if only you could go back to the days when it was only a few hundred. And I could have bought it when it was a few hundred. I could have said, all right, I'll eat my pride and I'll apologise to my brother or admit to him later that despite he telling me to get in and start mining it with graphics cards when it was a tenner, I ended up buying it when it was a few hundred. I still didn't. So yeah, we could all regret it like that, and we'd all be, I don't know, millionaires, but certainly hundreds of thousandaires, even if we just bought a few little bit, one Bitcoin, we'd be, we'd have 100,000 or more. Anyway, let's not argue about Bitcoin, because that's I'm terrible for going off on tangents. Yeah, but I do agree, Stephen. Even if it's an op or a psyop or a CIA created thing or whatever it is, if we all would have grabbed Bitcoin, as you say, back in the day, I would have cashed out a couple of years ago and had a massive tract of land, and only our folk would be allowed to live on it. I wish we all could have been like that as well, and not be greedy as well. I saw somebody recently, he was on Tucker Carlson, he said, I would have cashed out at 50,000 and then spent all my money on therapy because of the anguish and not having held onto it until it was 100,000. So I think there's a lot of life lessons a lot of people, we've all learned, whether you invested or not in Bitcoin, and even a lot of people who did invest in Bitcoin. The way, no matter how much you have, it's never enough for a lot of people. And they're always just filled with regret that they didn't have double what they actually got or whatever, So anyway, as Jack says, they keep deleting them and you need 50 subs to go live, and only OGs use YouTube. So you might as well be on as many platforms as allow you. And they each have their uses, I can see that now, but it takes a bit of energy to spread yourself a bit further as well. But, X has its uses, and even though it's apparently very possible to be deleted from both Rumble and both Rumble and Odyssey, I still do like Odyssey. And it has been useful for me, and I have engaged with a lot of people there. And I must remember to now check the comments now that I speak about it on Odyssey, just to see if there's any comments on Odyssey before I shut this down in hopefully 5 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Roughly 5 minutes. I'll just see if I can check Odyssey and see if there's anybody that had commented there, just to say I didn't totally ignore anyone who might have been there. But actually, okay, just shows sometimes I do get people who come in on live streams, but it says there's 2 watching there now, and somebody's already liked it, but I don't see any comments there, but that's fine. I'm not complaining, if you know what I mean. Just didn't want to ignore anyone there if there were people commenting. So yeah, Odyssey is good. I might only get like 2 or 3 people watching a live stream, but I tend to get regular comments from people, and it's very good at staying in touch with people, and good people, good, decent, honourable people. People you'd know as well, like Hans Waffelhausen, as he goes by sometimes. You might know him by that. Anyway, Stephen says, I miss those marathon EE streams on the weekend a while back. I could mow and work in the yard all day and have something to listen to. Well, that's great that you liked those, Stephen. And I'll have to do more on Odyssey as well. So I can have no Rumble or Odyssey. My name is illegal in the internet, yeah. Right. Anyway, I'll finish this off. The Outer Limits, says John Foster, Chip Burlett. Apparently he is a reputed CIA informant. The Outer Limits. All right, so maybe whatever he's saying in that phrase, there was a TV series of that phrase, but of that name. But whatever meaning is in the phrase, maybe this John Foster, Chip Burlett guy is trying to say a lot with a few words there. An honest book brings the data closer together, says RN, just the initials RN, from Mendocino in California. Fascinating. So a mind bender, meticulous organization, summarizes and cross-references so helpful to non-academics, says IH from Davenport, New York. And then from PR of your neck of the woods, not quite, but PR in Seattle, Washington. A great service to the American people and the world. This book truly ties everything together. The missing link I've been looking for as a French citizen and as a Jew. I found the French-Israeli connection fascinating and a logical conclusion. The French-Israeli connection, now there may have been more than one, but if there were French people involved, well, maybe they weren't exactly French. I can just guess at that before even looking into it further, right? But also the French, let's just say the French, whoever exactly the French were. I mean, we all know that if you looked at the French football team or rugby team or soccer team or whatever these days, they wouldn't look very French by what we'd have recognised even in the 90s. Most of them, they'd look more Algerian or North African of some extraction. But equally, there could be people who are French, as Napoleon discovered, who actually don't obey any French government at all, but a Sanhedrin, right? But regardless, whoever exactly these French were that had a connection, a French-Israeli connection, it just is the case for whatever reason that the French were subcontracted by, I don't know how many nations, but I'll say South Africans, to create their nuclear power plant, and also the Israelis to assist them not only with technical knowledge but with their personnel to go over and help build and help train the people who would be working in these nuclear power plants, assuming that any of it is real in the first place, you know. So that's two countries that I know of, and there was a connection between South Africa, so I hear, so many people have told me, between South Africa and the Israelis with acquiring nuclear technology and what's the word for it? Nuclear material. Uranium and whatever else, yellow cake or whatever they called it. So it's all lots of connections there that maybe you can't take as 100% guaranteed, but examine it within the confines of what they tell us anyway. Anyway, this fella PR from Seattle, Washington says, as a French citizen and as a Jew, I found the French-Israeli connection fascinating and a logical conclusion. As Shakespeare said, truth will come to light, murder cannot be hid. Is that from Macbeth? I don't know. Could be. Or maybe, what might it be? Something rotten in the state of Denmark. What's the one I'm thinking of there? Oh God, I can't remember. But you know the one. Hamlet, isn't it? Absolutely profound and overwhelming, says WS in Hopage, New York. And nonsense, just one word, nonsense, says Uri Palti, an Israeli diplomat. Right, so no wonder he thinks it's nonsense. Because he's an Israeli diplomat. Uri, Palti, Palti. So if a guy like that thinks it's nonsense, then maybe it ain't. So to me, it shows a great sense of humour that he would publish it, not just that Michael Collins Piper would publish it, not just on the back cover, in the sort of collection that he has there of reviews or feedback or estimations or what do you call it, appraisals of the book. But he would save the best to last, or the most damning criticism to last, because he knows that if one of these guys says it ain't true, then it probably is, you know. So it's probably the best endorsement he could have got for the book. So I think that's where I'll leave it, and I might start reading. Maybe it's too ambitious to see if I could read the whole book cover to cover. But I might start next week with the photographs as is suggested by the book, by the introduction. Might get straight to the sort of meat and bones of it, you know, or meat and potatoes, whatever you want to say of it, you know. Get to the heart of the matter. So the last quote is FAF. Is that like FAFO or I don't know. Anyway. But I appreciate that, you know, you appreciate it as well there. So Jack says, yeah, we all started noticing too hard. 2025 is the year, I think, when noticing went mainstream. I think we could say that. I think a lot of mainstream, or not mainstream, I think the mainstream know that we know. And I think, as I said earlier, I think a lot of normies are getting a sense in the zeitgeist that everybody these days, because you see people on X saying, why am I getting nothing but anti-Semitic literal Nazis in my feed every day? Elon, I didn't sign up to X or pay for my blue check mark on X to receive all this literally Hitler content every day. Why am I subjected to this? So I think they're understanding that something went mainstream, and whether they think that it's good or a bad thing, that everybody's talking about noticing certain things and revisiting and re-examining a lot of things as well. So look, with that in mind, this has been an experiment in a certain manner of speaking as well, to see, can I continue to stream without being shut off? I will leave this up. I'll let it process. Sometimes, I noticed last time I did a live, it didn't process on YouTube for more than 24 hours, which generally isn't a good sign. It's like they want to create the transcript and go over the transcript with AI with a fine tooth comb. But I'm going to allow it to do all that. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes to do it. And I'm going to leave it up. I'm not going to make it private. And I just think that I too will try to ride this out as long as I can. I wasn't using YouTube properly anyway. I was saying, oh no, I'll only put up a few sort of videos that are circumspect or maybe metaphorical or artistic, or say things without saying them or whatever. But I guess I was getting too lazy for that sort of thing. And by the way, it takes a lot of painstaking effort to sort of, record something, snip things out, putting pictures or moving things. And I don't know. I'd lost the passion for that, although no doubt if I'm allowed, I will continue to do that. I've got many, many things still on the sort of digital cutting room floor or in project stage, but never fully finished, or even sometimes, 75% or 95% there, but I'm not happy with it and say, I'll publish it later, I'll go back to it, I'm not sure how to finish that, or I know it's not perfect, or it's not good enough, never perfect, but not good enough to publish it. So happens when you sort of, use these kind of video rendering things and you have a timeline, you can just save your project and you say, I'll come back to it later. And then sometimes you rediscover these things, or you get inspired by something you've heard and say, now I know, there was something I was working on, and I go back to it, So I would like to keep my YouTube channel, but at the same time, I don't want to be a coward, and I want to be brave, and I want to speak off the cuff and be live. And I also enjoy not having the freedom, as I do sometimes, to sort of say, no, to second guess myself and take things back off the timeline, I do appreciate, and I think it's good for me too, for anyone, to go live and say what you're going to say, and even though it's not going to be perfect, that it helps you to get used to overcoming your own sort of it's not exactly self-censoring, but your own, it's not even inhibitions, your own sort of I suppose roadblocks or guard blocks that you just have there, that you have to just, it's nothing like a practice. It's like getting up in front of public, in front of real, like I say real people in the real world, and just overcoming your own fears of, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I forget to say anything? What if I forget what I was going to say? What if my mind goes blank? Which does happen sometimes, and you have to just continue on, like Scent of Woman, what if I get my feet all tangled up? Well, you just untangle them and just tango on. So it is great practice. And, I'm trying to strike a balance between not sort of not saying anything at all because you're overcautious, and then just having verbal diarrhea and it not being useful. So, and having idle chitter chatter and that kind of thing, and saying the same things over and over again. So, look, I do think, I'll finish on this, I do think that Final Judgment, the book, is worth looking at again. And I think Michael Collins Piper was a good man, and I think he deserves to have his work re-looked at again and put back into the zeitgeist again, especially that we're coming up to yet another anniversary. Is it the 62nd anniversary? Roughly that anyway, of JFK's assassination, in roughly a month's time. And I think it's important, and I think it it's effective to keep these things in the public consciousness, which is what I'm trying to do. That's my aim here. So I'll try and do another stream soon, if not tomorrow. Maybe I'll do another one tomorrow. We'll see how I'm fixed tomorrow, but I don't have that many excuses. Anyway, I'll say last thing. I'll just read the last thing here. Stephen says, whatever happened to the JC guy? The comment's gone now, but yeah. Oh, here it is. Wasn't that his name? Yes, JC. The guy that was an ex-Mason or something like that. Yes. Was it JC Owens? Yes, you have it exactly right. Well, who knows? He might be listening without commenting right now. I don't know. But I'm not saying that he is. But yeah, I haven't. It's been more than a year, maybe a year and a half. I did say this whenever I was asked at the time. We did sort of fall out. It wasn't over much. I did speak harshly to him in a sort of a private phone call. And I just sort of, you can sort of lose your patience with somebody. And I felt that he was, what am I trying to say? I felt that he was, well, let's say deliberately being unable to understand what I was saying or reluctant to understand what I was saying or this kind of thing. So I lost my patience with him. And I don't know what I said to him exactly, but I might have just said shut up to him very harshly, something like that. It wasn't anything too bad, not trying to obfuscate it. It's been a little while now, so I don't exactly remember the details, but it wasn't anything so bad, I don't think, that we couldn't reconcile at some point. But, I haven't made any efforts to do that, right? And I guess, it's just the way I am. I suppose, if I'm honest, maybe I suppose some of it must be a little bit of, what do you call it? Stubbornness, that kind of thing. But I'm also lazy. And also I tend to move on to other things. And sometimes I feel like, well, if that's the way it is, it's probably just meant to be. But I often do wonder what he might think about, current events, even though it's the same old. But there you go. And again, never say never. It's not as if there's no chance of us ever speaking again in the future. So we just might. You never know. And I did think it was always very enjoyable talking to him. And he had a lot of very interesting things to say. So, yeah, you never know. We might talk again in the future. Wobbly Boost says... Oh, he got deleted, did he? Jack says he got deleted. JC Owens, did he? Okay, well, hopefully he can come back if he wants to. Under some other, username or whatever. Wobbly Boost said, come 10th of December, Oz is doing digital ID. Not sure if that means I can't use the internet at all. Oh, yes. Well, we effectively do have it in a certain soft sense. It's been softly introduced, and this is how they will introduce it everywhere, in case you didn't know. So much of X already says to me, this post is being withheld in the EU because of local laws or blah, blah, blah. You get variation on that. And you don't know what it is. Now, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to list the ways in which I might be able to get around that, right? Because I'm not going to, give the authorities ways to fix or tamp down the screws even more. But you shouldn't have to, right? But that's on X. And so it's not necessarily the internet. You can't get on the internet necessarily, but so many of these platforms which have essentially taken over the internet. I mean, most normies, when you say the internet, they go, oh, you mean YouTube or whatever. Oh, you mean Facebook? Yeah. Whatever it is they use, So many of these platforms are already saying to people, if you want to do this, what you got to do is scan your face, hold your passport up or scan your passport and then open the camera on your phone or open a camera on your laptop and let's see your face, and we'll get AI then to confirm that we believe that your face matches the one on your passport or on your driver's license, and then we'll be satisfied that you are over 18, which is obviously, not the reason. It's a pretext. They pretend, we just don't want to show insensitive things to kids. But what I can see on X is all the things they're trying to prevent me to see. It's nothing to do with trying to keep kids safe or stuff. It's just whether they say this, similar hot button words or criticize who's and whatever. You know the way it is, right? So we see their game. But there's nothing that we can do to stop them, I suppose, because we don't own these platforms. I guess what we could all do in all continents is to say, well, we stop using them then, or boycott them or whatever. But, even if we weren't afraid of that being illegal, nobody's going to do that, or not enough people are going to do that. So you can see that's how they're going to soft introduce it. And so on X, anyway, there's a lot of these things where it says, or alternatively, you can get your cell phone, scan this QR code, and then it'll pop up an app. And then you can, with a similar method, prove that you're over 18. Anyway, I'll better wrap it up because I'm losing my voice here. Yeah, they use recommendations to try and profile you, hoping you'll watch enough hardcore right-wing stuff to colour you're a terrorist, or a domestic tourist. Excuse me for coughing now. I am losing my voice here. So I really better wrap it up. So it's a balance. Jack says, shows you, live shows who you truly are. I wish everyone would do a Jack stream. Yeah. Well, look, this is, the way that I am really. And my attitude is, I have shown my face sometimes, but I'm not going to go out of my way to make it easy for whatever authorities will eventually come for us all. I'm not going to, different matter of view, I'm not advising anybody should do anyway, but the way I think about it is if they want to come for me and they want to sort of knock on my door, well, first of all, I'm not going to presume that I'm important enough, that I'm a person of interest to them, but we'll all become interesting to them whenever we become effective enough, or whenever they get around to us, when they've, gotten rid of all the others. So I neither want to have any false notions about myself that I'm important enough they might be interested in me, but also don't be foolhardy and think that they would never knock on my door. So I expect it. It will come someday. And I just don't want to be foolish enough to hasten that, or, wish that I hadn't been making it easier for them. I don't like these guys enough. I don't like any of these people. I think they're all cowards, and I at least want to have to make them go to some effort, So that's, hope you understand what I mean there. There's Ulick. He says, hey John, hey, how are you doing, Ulick? Good to see you there. And sorry, I'm just wrapping it up now. But look, I hope to do a few more of these, and always full of good intentions. But hopefully, I'll stick to it, and hopefully, you'll catch the beginning of another one soon enough. If not tomorrow, maybe in the next day or two. So Jack says thanks, great stream, thumbs up, appreciate you, John. Appreciate you, Jack. And he says a Jack stream is a stripped down view of a human being, just a camera and a man, no script, no pretense. Exactly. Well, I didn't have any script there. Anything that I commented on was, as I'm sure you know, off the cuff there. And I do appreciate when things aren't perfect, because then somebody isn't reading from a script, Right. I kept nearly saying I'm wrapping it up. I will wrap it up now and say last thank you to everybody for listening in, whether it's live or on the playback, and I'll see you again before too long. Cheers, Wibbly Boost. Glad you enjoyed it. Okay, bye for now.